Good afternoon, folks. Thanks for coming by. I want to talk about, well, the quality of your lives, people's lives, depends on their careers. Quality of people's careers depends on their organizations, the kind of organizations that allow them to have a career. And the fate of their organizations depends on the leadership of the organizations. And leadership depends on personality. So there you have it. Personality, leadership, career success, and organizational effectiveness are tied together. Personality rules the world, and Karl Marx was wrong. What I mean by that was Karl Marx said, beware of the cult of personality. It's all about the great flow of the river of history. What happens, each of us is like a little blob floating on the river of life. The river starts here and goes someplace else, and we're just floating on the river, and we have no control over it. And my view is that Marx was wrong, that in fact, it's not the history rules the world, personality rules the world. So, for those of you who caught my talk earlier on today, I apologize because there's going to be a certain amount of overlap, but that's because I didn't know what I was doing when I got here. Life is about competition. That's a fundamental principle of biology. Life's about competition. There's competition inside the group for power, status, and control of resources. And there's competition, individuals compete within groups for power, status, and resources. There's competition between the groups for sheer survival. Psychologists focus on competition inside the group. Their HR people focus on competition inside the group. Who's in, who's out, who's up, who's down, who's winning, who's losing, who will the next vice president be. And that's all very interesting, but it's the competition between the groups that actually matters. Warfare was the principal factor driving human evolution. Liberals don't like to talk about that, but at time one, there we are, prehistory. You're in this part of the forest, they're in that part of the forest. At some point, they decide they like your stuff better than they like their stuff. They come to get your stuff. When they come to get your stuff, they don't come with their lawyers. They come with malevolent intent. And so that's what drove human evolution. If they wouldn't just kill you, they would eat you. If they killed you and eat you, then you disappear from the gene pool and your opportunities for reproductive success are gone. People in this room are descendants of folks who won that competition. So group survival always trumps individual survival, and that should be where the focus of leadership is. What's good for the group is always good for the individuals inside the group. What's good for the individual may or not be good for the group. That's the problem of free riders, people who participate in the group activities and don't contribute back to it. So my argument is personality drives leadership, leadership drives organizational effectiveness, and now I have to define my terms. The first question is, what is personality? Personality, the question is, how and what ways are we all alike, and how and what ways are we all different? Yep. Huh. Let's see what else we have here. Yeah, so people evolve. So what is the most important generalization we can make about people at a fairly high level? People always live in groups. We evolved, we're the most social species on Earth. We evolved as group-living animals. People always live in groups, and every group has a status hierarchy. People at the bottom, people at the middle, people at the top, and everybody knows who's where, and there's constant competition. So what that means is the two biggest problems in life are getting along and getting ahead. Getting along because we have to live with other people, getting ahead because the more status and power, the better off you're going to be. So how are we all alike, and how are we all different? And we're all alike in that we're consumed with, we should be consumed with. Not everyone is, as the mayor of Chicago says, you're either at the table or you're on the menu. Some people are participating, a lot of people aren't. But if you're in the game, then it's all about getting along and getting ahead. Sorry, here we go. So this is the big problem in life, getting along and getting ahead. We resolve those problems during social interaction. Getting along and getting ahead exists in fundamental tension. To get along with other people, you have to agree with them, you have to pretend you care, you have to laugh at their jokes. To get ahead, you have to outperform them. That infuriates them, they'll never forgive you. It's the line from Oscar Wilde, people will forgive you anything except your success. So getting along, getting ahead, fundamental tension, it takes a lot of skill to balance those two problems. So that's how we're all alike. How are we all different? We're all different in two ways, or two major ways. Personality should be defined from two perspectives. There's your perspective and there's my perspective. There's your, I'll do it this way. There's your perspective, there's the you that you know. There's your perspective on you. That's your hopes, your dreams, your fears, your aspirations, the things that terrify you in the middle of the night. Our perspective concerns how we see you, how we evaluate you, how we think about you. So identity, your identity is the person, this is personality. Your identity, it's identity and reputation. Your identity is the person you think you are. Your reputation is the person we know you are. So there's the you that you know, and there's the you that we know. And Freud would say, right, correctly, the you that you know is hardly worth knowing because you made it up. The only news in life concerns the you that we know. All the decisions and all the people marry you, hire you, promote you, loan you money based on how they see you, not on how you think about yourself. So from our perspective, the you that you know, your identity is basically a useless concept. You need to pay. This is what we mean by strategic self-awareness. You have to understand how other people see. There's nothing that you can know about yourself that's worth knowing. The only thing that's worth knowing is how other people perceive you. That's what will drive your career. Okay, making sure we're in. So the leadership literature is, so that's what personality is. It's getting along and getting ahead. It's identity and reputation, and that's pretty much it. Okay, what's leadership? Well, the leadership literature is enormous, as I mentioned earlier. It's like 25,000 volumes in the Library of Congress. It can be, and how do you make sense of that? I think you can separate it into two traditions. There's, on the one hand, there's what I call the troubadour tradition. This is the kind of stuff you find in Harvard Business Review. It's stories that people make up about leadership and then try to sell you. It's all very entertaining and fun to read, but the truth value is almost nil. Then the second tradition, the academic tradition, is the kind of things you find in peer-reviewed empirical research found in peer-reviewed journals. These consist of very well authenticated little bitty nuggets of information, like leaders are somewhat taller than their followers. So you as a leader or potential leader, what are you going to do? You know, get taller. So what you get from the academic tradition is empirical insights that don't accumulate to any kind of useful generalizations. So I think that's what I just said. The troubadour tradition is entertaining, but it's not scientific. The academic tradition is trivial, but it is true. So the consensus of most thoughtful non-academics is that the academic study of leadership has failed. And I don't bother you but it's failed for three reasons. The big reason it's failed is the way they define leadership. Most researchers define leadership in terms of the people who are in charge. That's 100%. You go to the journals. We studied a leadership sample. It was the people at the top of an organization. So what's wrong with that way of defining leadership? The following. Who gets to the top of large, hierarchical, bureaucratic, male-dominated organizations? And the answer is politicians. That's what's going on in these big organizations. It's a political dogfight, and the people who get to the top are the people who win the political dogfight. And when they get to the top, they may or may not have any talent for leadership. So I think it's a huge. I think that if you realize that the principal factor driving human evolution was warfare, and that the outcome of those contests was really consequential, I think in that context, leadership should be defined in terms of people are basically selfish. They like to do their own thing, except here comes an external threat. Leadership is about getting basically selfish people to pull together for a period of time to deal with an external outside threat. So leadership, he said, leadership should be defined in terms of the ability to build and maintain a high-performing team. And it should be evaluated in terms of the performance. Leadership ought not be defined in terms of who got elected president of the United States. Leadership should be defined in terms of someone who can take an organization and actually move it forward. Do you all see the point? Okay. So that's how we define leadership. Building and maintaining a high-performing team. So personality, getting along, getting ahead, identity, reputation, leadership, building and maintaining teams. So, with these definitions in mind, you can review the literature on leadership, and it actually begins to make some sense. And I think there are like what I'm going to say 5 themes that I don't want to talk about that. I'm sorry. When they invited me, they said I had 30 minutes, and then when they talked to me, they said I had 12 minutes. And so, yes, I know. So if you think about leadership as in terms of the ability to build and maintain a high-performing team, then you review the literature, you find some themes that actually make sense. So this is what we actually know about leadership. So first thing we know is this. I think that because leadership was so important in the history of the species in terms of literal survival, I think people have built-in pre-wired cognitive categories in terms of which they evaluate the people's claims to be effective leaders. And I don't think there's millions of data points to support the following conclusions. People evaluate leaders or leader candidates in terms of 4 dimensions, and these are the 4 dimensions. And they're in the order of descending importance. The first thing, if you're in charge, your staff are constantly watching you to see if you can be trusted. The most fundamental aspect of leadership is integrity. Do you lie? Do you tell the truth? Do you keep your word? Do you meet your obligations? Do you play favorites? Are you self-dealing? And if you fail that, and they're watching you constantly for signs that you lack integrity, and if you fail that, you're done. You're through entirely. And this is unbelievably powerful. If you try to evaluate business unit performance and you don't have a quantitative index of the performance of a unit, staff ratings of the degree to which they trust their supervisor or their manager is a proxy for business unit performance. It's really powerful. And once you lose that, you're done forever. The second thing people want to know is, I think I have these in the wrong order. The second thing people want to know is, do you know what you're talking about? If you're in charge, if you're the boss, if you're the coach, if you're the manager, people are going to be coming to you all day long saying, with problems. Now, how do I do this? How do I do that? And if you don't know if you don't understand the business at the shop floor level, you won't be able to give people good advice. And that is the big problem in certainly American business, is the cult of the MBA. MBAs have this body of formal knowledge, just like statistics. There are these formal principles that organize it, and you don't have to understand what's actually going on in the business because you know these deep principles, and that causes terrible problems. And then there are real data on this. The degree to which the staff see the manager as knowing what he or she is talking about fundamentally drives perceptions of leader effectiveness. The third thing that people want to see, so can you be trusted? Do you know what you're talking about? And then the third thing is, do you make good decisions? In business, there's never enough time, there's never enough data, situations are constantly changing, so says moi. You can't actually ever get it right. The base rate of correct decisions in business is about 50%. That is, making decisions in business is a random walk. So good judgment can't be defined in terms of the ability to get it right, because you're only going to get it right half the time. Good judgment has to be defined in terms of your ability to say, that was a mistake, we need to do something different. That's what good judgment looks like. And so that's it. Do you make good, solid decisions quickly based on partial information? And then are you willing to revise your judgment if you in light of negative information? So can you be trusted? Do you know what you're talking about? Do you make good decisions? And then finally, can you present a reasonable story about what's going on? Can you give them a vision that makes sense out of what they're doing? It makes their lives worthwhile. So those are the 4 absolutely fundamental characteristics, and this is leadership from the perspective of the subordinate. This is not what you tell other people during your interview. This is how other people see you, and that's how leadership should be understood. Is from the perspective of the subordinates. They want, are you a liar? Can you be trusted? Do you know what you're talking about? Do you make good decisions? And can you explain why this matters? And these, by the way, I don't know if it says that. These dimensions are essential for any 360. If you're doing a 360 in your organization, you need to cover this. Okay, then what else? There's this book by Collins. It was actually the first piece of empirical research that I ever found that was concerned organizational effectiveness. That is, what is the characteristics that make organizations? So we know what makes for good leaders. What makes for good organizations? So I'm sure you're all familiar with this study. Studied the Fortune 1000 companies, looking for companies that had 15 years of performance significantly below the standard for the industry, and then 15 years of sustained performance significantly above. And out of 1,000 companies, he found 11. And then he said, and he was not interested in personality. He was a structural theorist who was looking for structural factors, kind of like Marx. And he said in fact, he didn't believe he still doesn't understand his own results. He said what he found was that the difference in these 11 organizations was the CEO. He said all 11 CEOs were exactly the same. They were really humble. They were understated. They were laid back. They were quiet. He said, you walked in the room, you could not tell who was in charge. And they were sort of humble, but incredibly fierce and determined and driven. And so that's what makes for, so there it is. So you got to be integrity, competence, judgment, vision, and then humility and fierce desire to win. And that's the profile of a highly effective leader. So then that's what good leaders look like. Next question is, what's the relationship between personality and leadership? You can't answer that question. This is how you define personality. There are 5 big dimensions of personality. If you want to know the relationship between personality and health outcomes, personality and substance abuse, personality and marital satisfaction, personality and life satisfaction, you have to ask, what's the relationship between each of these 5 dimensions and that outcome? So if you ask the question, what's the relationship between personality and leadership? You have to say, what's the relationship between these 5 dimensions and leadership? Okay, so major meta-analysis of statistics that we do from about 2002 showed, and has been replicated many times, 4 of those 5 dimensions predict leadership ratings across organizational level. This sample had 5,000 organizations, 15,000 managers at all levels, and personality predicts leadership performance across all sectors, all industries, all levels, quite substantially. The best single predictor is the first factor. The worst predictor was the third factor. The multiple correlation between personality and leadership was 0.55, correlation for IQ 0.23. So if you believe in data, and not many people do, but if you believe in data, then the game is over. Personality is the best single predictor of leadership performance that we have, bar none. Okay, so correlation between personality and leadership, 0.55. How good is that? Here's the correlation between various medical outcomes, medical measures and outcomes. And if you look at what you'll see, correlation between Viagra and performance is 0.38. Personality is stronger than Viagra. Okay. And then I believe this is my my fourth point, leadership and business unit performance. Second, major meta-analysis. This is the Gallup organization did this. They have literally millions of data points on this. The manager's personality drives the staff's level of engagement. The staff level of engagement predicts the performance of the group. So when you hear a manager say, I can take this group to the next level, I can take this team to the next level, that's pure narcissism. It's not about the manager, it's about the group, it's about the team. So manager's personality drives team engagement, and team engagement predicts every significant outcome that you can measure. The higher the level of engagement, the lower the turnover, the lower the absenteeism, the higher the productivity, the higher customer service ratings for and quality, and vice versa. So, and then low engagement predicts exactly the opposite. Leadership is about creating engagement, which depends on the degree to which folks trust their manager. People, so this is the research that leads you to the line, people don't quit organizations, they quit their immediate boss. And why did they leave? Not because they hated the organization, it's because they hated their boss. And I would say, finally then, that the C-suite is completely ignorant of this. The people in the C-suite think they're the ones who drive the engagement in an organization. The people who drive the engagement in an organization are the long-serving first-line supervisors who are mean, nasty. Project X years ago, went to an engineering firm out where Ryan and I live. I went to the foundry. They build big pumps. This is the oil. We live out in the oil, what's called the oil patch. Big pumps that drive oil through. And where there's the foundry where they produce the casings, the blocks for the pumps. And as I walked into this area, there was a baseball bat lying. And I was interviewing the manager of the foundry. And I said, "What's the baseball bat?" And he said, "That's my leadership technique." That's where the disengagement comes. It doesn't come from the C-suite. It comes from the long-serving first-line supervisors who are just mean. Okay, and my last point is, what's the base rate of bad management in corporate America? I gave a talk. Well, I spent a lot of time working on this problem. My conclusion, based on lots of data snooping, is the base rate of incompetent management in corporate America, not of course in Shanghai or Singapore, is about 65 to 75% of all existing managers in the U.S. are driving their staff crazy. And we are the people who made that claim. I was at a conference in about 2008, right? And it was a room twice this size, twice as many, all suits, all business consultants, all McKinsey, and I said, "What do you to the group?" I said, "What do you estimate the base rate of managerial incompetence in corporate America to be?" He says 2%. Guy over here says 6%. The guy over here says 5%. And I said, it's somewhere between 65 and 75%. And they went, like this. They're shaking their fists at me like this. Like, I mean, really, like, and I said, "You're a bunch of whores." There's no news in good news. Consultants make their money telling companies good news, but the moral obligation is to tell them the truth, which involves telling them, what they don't want to hear. Thank you. So there you have it. So personality predicts leadership, good or bad. Leadership predicts team or firm performance, good or bad. What are the mechanisms involved? This is our model. We call this the leadership value chain. So at the top is personality, and the mantra is who you are determines how you lead. And there are three channels. There's behavior, how you treat people. There's values, the kind of culture that you create, and then there's decisions, the kind of decisions that you make. Personality drives the way people treat their staff. Personality drives the kind of culture that people create, and personality drives, the data are absolutely overwhelming on this. Personality drives the decisions that you make. All of those accumulate. You get it right, treat people right, create the right culture, make the right decisions. Then you get engagement, and engagement drives business unit performance. So this is the way personality translates into business. Do you all see that? Okay, so psychologists focus on the behavior loop. Business schools focus on the decision-making loop. Anthropologists focus on the values loop. You have to read all three literatures to be able to put this value chain together. Okay, then. So last thoughts. Consider the 20th century. How many people died in natural disasters? There were 200,000 people were killed in a tsunami in Aceh province about 15 years ago. So 20th century, how many people died in natural disasters? Make a number, guess the number, pick a number. You got your number? Okay, consider that in the 20th century, 167 million people were killed for political reasons. 167 million people were killed for political reasons. 30 million people were killed by invading armies, and 137 million people were killed by their own government. It really matters who's in charge. Choosing the right leadership is literally a matter of life and death. The personality of the CEO is the most important determinant of business unit performance. It counts for more variance in business performance, financial performance, than any other factor except the industry in which the organization is operating. Well-run companies are significantly more profitable than poor. The data on this are overwhelming. Good management starts at the top. When good leaders are in charge, everyone wins. When bad leaders are in charge, you get Venezuela. Effective organizations, family, schools, businesses, hospitals, universities, countries Effectiveness of organizations drives the well-being of the members. Leadership drives organizational effectiveness. Leadership is a function of personality. All organizations have problems all organizations have their problems. And bottom line on all of this, the best organizations make the fewest mistakes. I said, remember Thucydides. This is the history of the Peloponnesian Wars, which I read a few years ago. In the middle of the book, it's Sparta is coming to invade Athens. The Athenian nobles meet in the Parthenon to discuss what they're going to do about the Spartans, and everyone wants to know about what's the Spartan. There's a question: what's the Spartan strategy going to be? What's the Spartan strategy going to be? And Pericles, in this moment of absolutely blinding clarity, says, "I care less about the Spartan strategy. I care more about our mistakes." And when I read that, I literally dropped the book. I said, boom, that's it, that's it. All you can control is your own mistakes. You can't worry about what they're going to do, your competition. You just have to get it right yourself. And boom, all the way back to the ancient Greeks, right? Thank you for your attention.